My name is Max Rissman, and the PAD taught me how you can just kind of jump in and start with nothing and let art come out of just people being together.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the PAD podcast. My name is Rob Morgan. I teach design at Washington University in St. Louis, and very, very happy to have today's guest, Max Rissman. Max Rissman is an alum, proud PAD alum of Washington University. He's a screenwriter, director, producer, filmmaker. He's got all kinds of projects happening all over the place. Really, really beautiful, beautiful work. He's a staff writer for Pocket FM at the moment. Got a graduate degree at NYU after leaving WashU. Very, very excited to have Max Rissman on the PAD podcast. Enjoy. All right, my guest today is Max Rissman. Max, thanks so much for being on the PAD podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You mentioned a little bit about your work as a collaborator. Can you talk a little bit about collaboration?
Certainly, that was a big lesson that I learned in not just as part of my PAD life, but also as part of my experiences doing in student theater groups and productions, and I was in an improv group, and I did kind of the 24-hour play festivals, and all of those experiences.
I'm reminded of that old saying, I'm not sure I have it exactly right, but that the sum of our parts is much more than what we alone can do. That what you can create with others is so much bigger than ourselves, for sure.
Absolutely.
So let's back up a little bit further. Like, what made you choose WashU? How did you land on that choice and kind of chart your path a little bit? Did you maybe come into WashU intending on majoring or minoring in something else and then change gears? How'd you get to WashU?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it being very much a vibe thing, where I visited the campus and just kind of liked how I felt when I was walking around campus. Everyone seemed pretty friendly. The campus was beautiful.
Sure.
It was far enough away from my parents that they couldn't just drive up and drop by whenever they wanted.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, just in terms of it had a very kind of down to earth feel, and I kind of got the sense from some schools that it was very kind of cutthroat and competitive,
Hmm.
where everyone was kind of, gunning to be valedictorian,
Yeah.
but WashU very much did not feel like that.
Yeah. I've had a lot of students tell me that over the years, that it's not as that WashU is more of a high tide rises all boats kind of idea, that people celebrate your success because it means we all succeed. And I'm glad to hear that, actually. It certainly hasn't seemed that way in my 13 years at WashU. I think it's 13. I've lost track. My time at WashU, that the students really do celebrate each other, which is fantastic.
Totally.
So you arrived at WashU, and did you have an intention at the moment of I know you've got at least in arts and sciences, you have a couple of years to decide what you want to declare. What was your course?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty certain that I wanted to do a film and also do a lot of, theater and PAD. I didn't wind up majoring and minoring in PAD, but I pretty much fulfilled all the course requirements.
Sure. We'll
Except
we'll
for like
send you
one.
one. We'll send you one for
Okay, thanks.
honorary.
Appreciate it. But yeah, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, so I knew I wanted to major in film and media studies, and I had like a fleeting interest in Arabic, which went away pretty quickly my freshman year. And yeah, and I wound up double majoring in psychology just because I had, I kind of fell into it taking a lot of the course requirements as well, but I always had a interest in the human mind and how what makes people tick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wound up double majoring in psychology as well.
Gotcha. And you're a very accomplished writer as well. Did you take a lot of writing classes? Obviously, beyond the required college writing. Did you take playwriting? Did you take screenwriting classes?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I took playwriting, I took screenwriting, I did a lot of writing on my own as well.
Of course. Yeah. 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 Fantastic. And so you progressed through and you graduated WashU, and then what was your next steps after that? Where was your you did you grow up on the East Coast? You mentioned that you were
Yeah, I
far
grew up,
enough away. I think
right,
that's important
exactly.
to be far enough away from your parents that they can't check on you every once in a while. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my brothers both went to school within driving distance of my parents, and
gotcha.
I am glad that I took a different path.
Gotcha.
Although, it was great to have them visit, but when having had enough warning. But
So,
yeah, no, I grew up in New Jersey and, kind of in the suburbs of New York.
mhm.
So after graduating, I graduated in 2012, and I went back to the East Coast. I was kind of interning. I moved to New York City, and I was interning for a couple different places. I interned for like an ad agency and had a terrible time.
Mm,
And I entered for the Tribeca Film Festival, but I was applying to film schools in that kind of year after college, and I was accepted into NYU for film school, and so I wound up going to NYU and doing
gotcha.
that for like 4 years.
I apologize. I want to double back and ask you what kind of, I guess you'd call them extracurriculars you did at WashU. You said you were in some PAD shows and some drama clubs. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was in some PAD shows. I was in some like Thyrsis or
Yeah.
AST. I can't remember exactly which one, but student theater.
Right.
Uh, and then I was in Suspicious of Whistlers,
Oh
the long.
yeah, yeah. Do you know Julia Linden? Julia Linden is
Yeah,
yeah. She
yeah,
just was
she's a close friend.
guesting. She's going to be coming to WashU April 19th to sort of alumni weekend. And she's going to do a screening of one of her shows. I'm not sure which one. We haven't decided yet, but she's a great wonderful as you are right now, like an alum who's pays it forward. So we appreciate that.
She was 1 year below me in Suspicious.
Yeah, I've heard that I know that one of her beloved student groups was Suspicious of Whistlers, which I think is still around, if I'm not
It
mistaken.
is.
Yeah, yeah. So after graduation, you went to New York, and the Tribeca name actually has popped into my head too because she had a piece that was screened at Tribeca, Lady Liberty, it's called.
Right.
Um, but this isn't about her; it's about you. So then, how did you? What happened next for you? You've had a web series going that's gotten quite a bit of acclaim. So where did your path lead after interning a couple of places in New York?
Yeah, sure. So I went to film school from 2013 to 2017.
Gotcha. And that was where?
At NYU. And yeah, I mean, that was another kind of like amazing and very collaborative experience where we were all just, film nerds, like helping each other make movies. And, I kind of wish that life could be like that because it was just, a pure creative container where, all kind of like practical, like real world concerns were put away and we were all just helping each other make movies.
I love it.
Um, so I made a bunch of short films. I made a web series, and after that, I moved out to LA for a few years, and was writing as many screenplays as I could, trying to make something happen. Not really having the best of times. Was feeling kind of frustrated and like didn't really like the LA lifestyle. But I did wind up making a feature film, which we shot in 2022, 2 years
Mhm.
ago. And, so that's going on the festival circuit now.
Is that
And
Upon Waking?
it is, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I saw the trailer for that, and I will link it in the podcast description. It's fantastic. It's amazing. I wish you all the best with that one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you did that while you were based in LA. That's your writing.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. What was that process like? I mean, it seemed like it had just the production quality alone in the trailer is just top notch.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was something I had been working on for a few years. I knew that I really wanted to make a feature film while I was living in LA, and then leave. But yeah, and I didn't really know why, but I just kind of had that sense that that's the order that it should happen.
Sure.
But so yeah, so it took me a few years to work on the script and figure it out. And then I kind of through different uh, friends and connections, I found some LA-based producers who kind of helped me like assemble everything that you need to make a film. And then, we shot it in April of 2022. And it was, I mean, compared to my experience of making movies in film school, where like you kind of knew everybody involved and it was kind of very, it was this kind of creative community and this very safe container, even though it was very stressful and terrifying. It was still like you were working with people who you knew and trusted. This experience was quite different in that I didn't know anyone of any of the people that I was working with. And everyone did a great job and it was an amazing experience, but it was just a very different experience of working with people who are doing it as a job versus working with people who are doing it because they're your classmates and
Of course.
you're kind of part of the same cohort.
Yeah. I'm curious that you mentioned working in the sort of academic kind of realm, where everybody you're working with is really your friends, and there are versus this realm. Is there a similar, I guess, stress level of risk taking that you have to kind of accept that we're just going to dive in, and this is your baby. This script, in the case of Upon Waking, is your baby. Did
Right.
it feel like there were like the screws are just a little tighter in the professional realm?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean,
Of
when there's money involved, then the screws are always tighter.
course, yeah.
But yeah, it was very much like the entity that I knew I had to put my trust in was the movie.
Hmm.
And so even though I didn't really know the people who I was working with, I knew that I had to trust the movie.
Yeah,
And that was the thing that kept me putting one foot in front of the other.
makes sense. Makes sense. Was there anything about your process that you maybe learned at WashU that I find there are so many. I teach a class on creativity as well as teaching design at WashU, and I find the creative processes of different artists to be in many ways different, but in some ways similar. That there's a bit of anxiety, I guess you might say, to look at the blank page. In my case, it's the blank empty model box. Um,
Mhm.
what about your kind of development as a writer? Did you sort of find about yourself maybe while you were still here at WashU or at any NYU later?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess thematically, I kind of developed a lot of the themes and the topics that I like to write about
Yeah.
at you. That kind of the beginnings of that started to kind of emerge when I was at WashU, and I definitely remember that.
Mm,
I focus a lot on topics of forgiveness and especially self-forgiveness
mm.
and coming to a place of self-love. And so,
We had a brief interruption from the cable guy here, but we'll get right back to it. Oh yeah, just you mentioned self-forgiveness and self-love in your process. I think that's so important for young writers, young artists to hear that. As you know, I think any psychiatrist will tell you that in order for you to take care of anyone else, you have to take care of yourself first. And you mentioned that you have some grace with yourself when it comes to your being a writer and beginning there in a sense and saying, okay, I'm gonna let this story sort of take a path and embrace it, I guess. And if it doesn't
right.
work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no sure things and there's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Certainly remember when I was trying to learn how to write plays and write screenplays, like, I wanted to be like a good, diligent student
Sure.
and kind of learn how to do it
Yeah.
and like read all the things that you're supposed to read and, follow the steps that you're supposed to follow and hopefully avoid all the kind of pain and confusion and frustration that like is involved that other people had to suffer through so that I wouldn't have to. But it really doesn't work like that. You really need to just kind of you need to learn the basics. You need to learn what you're doing,
Of course.
in terms of the craft, but it's for, even the most experienced writer, vast majority of your time, you're going to be kind of clawing your way through the dark,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what you're trying to express and kind of inventing your own process and your way to do it as you go. So yeah, so
Hmm.
it's just kind of, you have to be comfortable with uncertainty and mystery.
Yeah. I love that. That's really, really poetic, I think. Not surprising from a writer. I find it's interesting there's a parallel there maybe to painting, that there's a proficiency a painter has to have with different colors to know these colors, when mixed, change to this color, that you have the sort of fundamentals down. But when it comes to finding your voice, you have to have a mastery of those fundamentals in order to iterate and play, I guess, in a script. Would you say that's how your process kind of goes as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, it totally depends on the project. Like,
Sure.
for certain projects, one process works and it doesn't work for another project.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Do you begin a writing? I talked to a playwright friend of mine once, and I was fascinated by this, that he kind of sets up some characters, but he doesn't plot out what's going to happen, and he just starts writing, and he lets those characters, he's like a vessel for the characters. He's somewhat detached from the process in a strange kind of way. Do you set up yourself for yourself, particularly when you did, for a while, you did a play a week? You're writing one short play a week. Do you find that that helps you write something that's interesting, that you become kind of, I don't know, a referee for a couple of characters in a scene?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, for me, it doesn't quite work like that.
Uh-huh.
It's more so like if I find an idea that's interesting or compelling, then like that's the thing that kind of brings me along, less so I have like an idea of like a couple of interesting people that I just want to put them together and see what happens. Like it's
Sure.
more I have like a situation or a topic that I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, and sometimes I need to really map it out and outline it before I can start writing. And that's necessary, but other times that would be a hindrance and I need to just kind of start writing and see what happens.
Sure.
And yeah, and it's kind of hard to know what kind of project you have, like whether it requires a lot of planning and a lot of outlining, or
Sure.
it just based on experience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I find this sort of thing fascinating, at least with the creative brain, just how the similarities are there across any number of artistic disciplines. There's a bit of a leap of faith that you have to take in yourself. So anyway, thanks for that. I find that kind of stuff fascinating. I want to add here that I read somewhere once that Kurt Vonnegut himself would host parties, and he'd have an idea. You mentioned sometimes an idea. He would have an idea, and he would leave his own party. Like he would just like vanish and be like, Where'd Kurt go? Well, he's upstairs writing." Like that he sort of took no prisoners, or he didn't care where he was when something struck him. He knew he had this penchant for writing it down immediately. I don't know if you have a similar kind of process, but
I don't know if I've ever really left a party to go write. Um, yeah, I mean, certainly when an idea that you're excited about hits, like it's a huge energy boost. And
yeah,
I feel like that's kind of the reason why, like that's why I do it.
sure.
I think why a lot of writers do it is because the feeling of like I have an idea that I'm excited about now and like I want to work on it and write it down, like is kind of the point.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and everything else can kind of it comes and goes, and every writer wants to like have a sustainable career and get recognition for their work and and share their work and hopefully have other people like it. But the addictive nature of writing and creative art, I think, is the feeling of having the rush of having an exciting idea or figuring out like problem in a creative way that
Yeah.
has been bothering you for a while.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I think that's so profound to think about how that works. So upon waking is I'm just going to go ahead and predict it's going to be a blockbuster hit. And I wish you all the best with that.
Well,
So you did that
you're
piece,
right.
that full-length feature in LA, and then what happened? Where did you go from here? From there, should I say?
Yeah, sure. So I moved back to the East Coast, and in the meantime, I've been writing. I've been writing other screenplays. I was working on that one short play a week project. I've written a bunch of short stories. I've written a couple of plays as well, like full-length plays.
Hmm.
Uh, and then I started working for a fiction podcast company.
Yeah,
And that's kind of been my quote unquote day job for the last few months.
I love it. Do you want to plug up? Do you want to plug that podcast company?
Sure. So it's called Pocket FM.
Hmm.
And it's kind of just like, it's like audio fiction. There's just like a whole bunch of different shows.
Gotcha. And
You know,
you're a writer on those shows.
yeah, well, so there's many writers. It's kind of like a
Gotcha.
giant TV network, but
Yeah.
for radio.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
so yeah, so there's a whole bunch of basically they adapt stories written in Asia for Western English
Oh,
speaking.
interesting. That sounds fascinating. Nice.
Yeah.
And you can do that you can do that type of work from home. It's remote.
Yes.
That's fantastic. I find that the future of work is so my own stepdaughter, my oldest stepdaughter works from home. She has a two-bedroom apartment and one bedroom is an office. And
Right on.
she loves it. It's like there's no commute. She gets the work done. She has meetings much like the one we're on now and everything works out. I think that's fantastic for you. If you don't mind me saying, I want to sort of congratulate you on behalf of myself and the PAD colleagues I represent, to congratulate you on being recently married.
Thank you very much.
That's fantastic.
My wife and I appreciate that.
How did you two meet?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the middle of the pandemic. We met on a
Ah,
dating app. We went on like a hiking date,
nice.
and things went well enough.
Nice. Nice. Nothing like a socially distanced hiking date to start things off.
Absolutely. They
That's
work.
fantastic. That's fantastic. Oh, very, very happy for you. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So have you had the opportunity over the years to collaborate with other WashU alums? I noticed that you did a piece called Game Boy, and I couldn't help but notice Artem Krimer, who's a WashU alum. Sometimes I see people pop up in my news feeds and like, oh, wait, they're doing great. They graduated a couple years ago. So are there others that you maybe continue to collaborate with?
Yeah, for sure. So, WashU actually, I feel like it has a pretty robust, artistic community, both in LA and New York, and I
Yeah,
guess Chicago, although I'm not as familiar with the Chicago community.
sure.
But yeah, a few of my friends who I knew from WashU are working actors. A few are working writers, and you mentioned Julia Linden,
Yeah.
another friend of mine, Michael Castelline. He's a TV writer,
Uh-huh.
and my friend Sasha Diamond is a working actor in New
Oh
York.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's quite an impressive creative community of
Yeah.
Washington films.
If I'm not mistaken, Sasha was in a production of Hairspray that I designed. It was my first show ever. I designed at WashU when I first arrived in 2011. I think you and I just maybe barely crossed paths in your last year at WashU as my first year at WashU. But as I recall, she's got one heck of a singing voice. So yeah, I'm always impressed by the talents. I think that's the one thing about theater in general is that you get a front row seat for the talents that your friends can do that I could never sing to save my life. Kind of that can do. So I find that really interesting and wonderful. Well, it's just been so great to chat with you, Max. Is there anything else you want to mention that we maybe overlooked in talking today?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, certainly it can be tough out there. I had a really tough time kind of transitioning out of school and kind of adapting
Mm,
to life after school. And, that's kind of typical for everybody, but especially for artists, it can be very scary. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a brave new world, and
mm.
you kind of have to take a leap of faith. And, if you're committed to your art and you're committed to your own growth and self-discovery, then that's a life worth living.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I know that you're a busy guy, and we're just so proud of you and your success. Honestly, I was just delighted to do some research on you, and your website is spectacular. Some of the trailers I was watching they just seem so compelling. So I wish you all the best, just not on your past success, but building on that on your future success. So thank you for your time, Max.
Thank you very much.
It's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you. All right. Many, many thanks to Max Rissman for joining the PAD podcast. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, do not be shy. Email me, rmorgan, RMORGAN, at the infamous Woostl, WUSTL.edu. And I would love to interview you for the pod. Again, thanks to Max Rissman. Thanks to all of the previous guests and future guests. It's quite an honor to do this podcast and get to know our alumni and all the wonderful things they're doing across the entertainment spectrum. Until next time, thank you for listening.